one of the biggest enemies of truth, the collective truth, or like, it's censorship. I think we've talked about it, and that was understood right under Lenin, right? For when there was debate, and you have to have debate, you have to have open conversation, you have to have, hash those things out. And I think that's like the scariest thing, and that's why I tend to be more afraid. I understand, like, there's opposite sides, right? But they're all working towards the same end. But I am more afraid of those who don't find a problem with, censoring people.
Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. We are online at what-s-left.webnode.com. My name is Andy Lipson, and we are joined by Kenny Zepeda, and Jessica is back. Welcome, Jessica. And you can see, once again, we are joined by John Klyczek, who is the author of School Board Order, The Technocratic Globalization of Corporatized Education, and a frequent contributor to Unlimited Hangout. Welcome, Jake, and you will also note that Eduardo is not here this week. He will be back next week. One final thing to say is just remember to please subscribe, rate, and review, and turn on your notifications. Share your favorite episodes and jot down our information wherever you find this episode. And just a word of warning, folks, we were threatened with an episode, a previous episode being taken down. In fact, YouTube had taken it down. It was our fellow teacher to fellow traveler, the one where we interviewed James Deschaines, and they said there was, medical misinformation in it and what have you. That could have taken our channel down. It would have taken our channel down for a week. We actually appealed it, and I was surprised to see that our appeal was upheld. So they removed the community strike or what have you. But just to let people should know that we're not necessarily going to be a long time on YouTube. We're here now. But you should know that we're on these. The reason we tell you about the other channels that we're on, of Rumble and Telegram and Bitchute and forgetting some of them, but Odysee and the other ones you hear about, is because we could be off any time from. And it was an old episode, like a year and a half ago. So they could do it. They could give us a strike for one a year and a half ago, another strike, and then we're gone for 2 weeks. And if we get 3 more strikes, we're out on YouTube. So people should not get comfortable with thinking that they'll always find us on YouTube. So, and if you ever find we're gone, look for us elsewhere. And again, that's why we tell you about our blog. So today we're actually coming back. This is really part 2 of our episode on PSYOPs and on the lies that we're all in. And I thought, well, what we hope to do is kind of talk about what do we do about that. But Jake actually has created a really good visual overview of what we talked about last week. So Jake, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can tell us kind of your synthesis you made of our discussion last week.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So, as you and I have talked many times, oftentimes I get a better understanding of stuff after I've either written about it or discussed it thoroughly, and didn't write about this, but it's sort of reflecting on everything from last time. Basically, this is sort of to kind of illustrate ultimately what we talked about in terms of the interactive internet activities, psychological operations that basically uses social media and alt media to sort of put people into these what Michael Aquino called these various group dynamics, and thereby manipulate people's beliefs, habits, mores, taboos, etc. Okay, and so basically we start off with your corporate social media and mainstream media, and you're going to have data mining operations, and the data mining is basically going to be looking at biometrics and psychometrics, okay, behavioral psychology data basically, but it's going to run those data points through basically all your various identity politics categories. So we talked a lot about sort of the Great Awakening in the the sort of right of center alt media stuff last time, but I mean, all the, I guess what you could call your various woke categories fit in here. I'm trying to move this thing and it won't move. There it is. Sorry. Uh, so ethnicity, class, gender, sexuality, religion, politics, etc. Okay, you take all that data in those different group dynamics, and you basically can run AI psychological profiling and predictive analytics. You take that and you run it through this interactive internet activities operation. Okay, and based on that data, you can sort of steer each one of those various identity groups through various forms of what we discuss in our Barbara Marx Hubbard episode, which is called the human potential movement. So basically, you create ways for people to achieve their individual self-actualization or their human potential, to use Maslow's term, basically by consuming various media or other products, or other, getting on sort of these social media virtue signaling trends, to basically, again, become self-actualized through your group identity. Okay, and those can be filtered through your mainstream stuff, or it can be filtered through your alt media stuff. And your alt media stuff has basically an MLM component, multi-level marketing. So it's basically this, which always goes together, or often goes together, with the human potential movement. And that is, right, you're consuming that identity through those various media outlets by consuming the ideas and sharing the ideas, and also consuming, oftentimes they have products like, alternative holistic health products. Okay, and then you sort of create, you don't just self-actualize your individual identity, but right, you sort of coalesce into these groups, and through one pathway, right, basically the mainstream media stuff, your mainstream social media, largely are being driven into, your official consensus with what is the Great Reset, and through various alt media venues, you're being filtered into what's become known as this Great Awakening. And then eventually they drive a clash between these two larger groups, which can be broken up into these smaller groups. And then through that clash, basically you can synthesize all the different groups into this new age revolution, which ultimately winds up in technocracy, which is basically the end game of the Great Reset. So that's basically it.
Well, I think that's an awesome summary of, for me, just the general notion of the fact that we are essentially marinated in a sea of lies, and we're trying to figure out how to make our way through it. But I think that is a great way of saying that. Jessica, you were not here for last week's episode, but you got a chance to listen to it. Do you have any thoughts you want to share with us about what you made of this week's episode or last week's episode, or anything that Jake just shared there?
Yeah, no, I love the chart. I always love when you do those charts, because we get to see like the way your brain works a little bit. And I feel like when I look at that, it's like I walk away not only thinking like, okay, what do we do? How do we navigate this? But it's like the, on like the trail maps, it's like you are here. And I'm like, where am I? Like, where's the room for like the human in all of this, right? And I guess in light of last week's episode, I've just been thinking a lot about human psychology and sort of, yeah, I mean, especially in light of the last few years, but even just looking back, like, I feel like we've been having a lot of recent conversations on and off the podcast about what is working and what is not working. Because there's a lot of like really great people doing amazing research, right? That feel like it's not reaching enough people, or it's not reaching people in the way that it needs to reach them. And I guess I've just been thinking about all the different factors of like how people either take on propaganda or believe PSYOPs, or, all of this stuff that you guys discussed last week, versus, what enables somebody to actually have some sort of wall of critical thinking or ability to see through certain aspects of it. And it's really complicated, like that part at the top of your chart, Jake, with the psychometrics and stuff. I mean, just thinking about like, this is such a silly example, but one from my personal life that I'm just experiencing right now. So like about a year, yeah, probably a year ago, one of my favorite herbalists kind of introduced me to some information about essential oils and how they're not actually uh, great from a sustainability perspective and from a health perspective. Like they're kind of greenwashed antibiotics in a way. And I could tell like that there was something to this information. Um, this is not like Great Reset, like, jabbing 12-year-olds on a global scale, right? Like this is something like super small, on a personal level. But even that, like I just was not ready to like internalize that and like take it on and act accordingly. And it has taken me a year and I'm finally like willing to accept it on not just like an informational level, but also like an emotional level, on a applied level. And I think it's just like I just bring it up because it's like if it takes that long for something so seemingly like apolitical and unimportant in the grand scheme of things. I mean, not that it's not important. It is, like, sustainability and all that, but like, God, like, no wonder people are falling for that stuff, right? And it's just, I mean, there's everything, right? From, yes, the information that you're being handed down from whatever, like whether it's from a authority or somebody that you know, or somebody on social media or an algorithm. But then there's like the circumstances of your life, and there's the messenger and what role that messenger has from your point of view. There's emotions, their emotions, your emotions, the music playing behind the ad, whatever, personality, relationships, history, drama, like your own self-worth, your own health and well-being, and then like your broader worldview, right? And like how does that, whatever the information is or whatever the propaganda that's coming at you, whether it's real or false, like how does that fit into your story, right? That you're thinking and sort of living in. How does it fit in, or does it? So I don't know. That's a few of my rambly thoughts. I brought one little thing to read, and I was gonna save it and see if it came up. But maybe I don't know if you guys want to hear. It's just about a page. So I've been reading, rereading actually, Tom Robbins' *Still Life with Woodpecker*. Do you guys know it? It's a famous novel from the 80s, like early. Let's see, actually, I don't want to misstate. 1980. Yeah. A really funny, like very Pacific Northwesty. Like I read it freshman year of college, right when I moved to Portland. So it's fiction. But I actually picked it up because I just went on a backpacking trip, and that's why I was gone last week. So I picked it up because I wanted something to read, and it's like really small and light, my copy. But it's funny. I was reading this morning, and there was this passage that I was like, oh my gosh, this connects so well to what we're going to talk about today. So it's just about a page. Okay. It's safe to say that objects, as we understand them, are relatively stable, whereas ideas are definitely unstable. They not only can be misused, they invite misuse. And the better the idea, the more volatile it is. That's because only the better ideas turn into dogma. And it is this process whereby a fresh, stimulating, humanly helpful idea is changed into robot dogma that is deadly. In terms of hazardous vectors released, the transformation of ideas into dogma rivals the transformation of hydrogen into helium, uranium into lead, or innocence into corruption, and it is nearly as relentless. The problem starts at the secondary level, not with the originator or developer of the idea, but with the people who are attracted by it, who adopt it, who cling to it until their last nail breaks, and who invariably lack the overview, flexibility, imagination, and most importantly, sense of humor to maintain it in the spirit in which it was hatched. Ideas are made by masters, dogma by disciples, and the Buddha is always killed on the road. There is a particularly unattractive and discouraging common affliction called tunnel vision, which for all the misery it causes ought to top the job list at the World Health Organization. Tunnel vision is a disease in which perception is restricted by ignorance and distorted by vested interest. Tunnel vision is caused by an optic fungus that multiplies when the brain is less energetic than the ego. It is complicated by exposure to politics. When a good idea is run through the filters and compressors of ordinary tunnel vision, it not only comes out reduced in scale and value, but in its new dogmatic configuration produces effects the opposite of those for which it originally was intended. That is how the loving ideas of Jesus Christ became the sinister cliches of Christianity. That is why virtually every revolution in history has failed. The oppressed, as soon as they seize power, turn into the oppressors, resorting to totalitarian tactics to, quote, protect the revolution. That is why minorities seeking the abolition of prejudice become intolerant, minorities seeking peace become militant, minorities seeking equality become self-righteous, and minorities seeking liberation become hostile. A tight asshole being the first symptom of self-repression. So I just thought that was like, so I was like, oh, maybe that'll be a good sort of opening. Just this idea of like ideas being just inherently like ripe for misuse just by their very nature.
Well, that's going to take it in a definite different direction if we go to it. So let's see where it takes. Kenny, what do you think?
Man, that's a lot to think about. But I mean, it does, I guess, to connect this, like, it makes me think about my own process in, like discovering areas where I was wrong and I was misled and I fell for things that I thought were right. And because I was exposed to just like one hallway, right? Or, one of those areas, there was a point where I was a very liberal person that thought that was doing right, by rejecting the right wingers, and that, I was as militant as many people who were, canceling the anti-vaxxers, quote unquote. And, but I guess it's taken me being on this receiving end to realize how this whole thing works, like how scary this is, that to think that you're right, to think that you're also going to sources that are more objective, quote unquote, and yet you also realize that even those things are tainted, because there is a transmitter, right? There is a mediator of information, and so like, so that's what I think this conversation is important to me, to see how it is that everyone else deals with it. Because like, by no means do I think I'm completely right. I have strong convictions, because like, as much as I understand that it's important to be an observer and ask questions and, follow logic in things, I'm also human, and like you said, there is emotion, there is just that's exactly what makes us human, and I think the people who are the arbitrators of truth or information, they know this stuff, like, and this is not new, like that they've known this for a long time, and what it's new is the degree of insidiousness, and detail that they can reach us, and so again, like, more than anything, I have more questions than answers about where I'm at. Just like you mentioned before, Jessica, like from that chart that Jake shared at the beginning, I have to ask myself constantly, like, where do I fit in there? Because I cannot be arrogant to think that I'm not in that, somewhere in there, like trapped in that web of information. So I guess more than anything, I have questions, and I have to ask myself constantly and like pause, and be challenged, because obviously if you're just surrounded by people that think like you, like say the exact same like think like you, that's where I found myself in identity politics, and it didn't feel right, and it didn't feel complete. It didn't feel like it had answers. It was another trap. And so how do we, right, like, how do we then keep ourselves from falling too deep into a rabbit hole that we think we're controlling, but we're not?
Yeah, and I think I want to, maybe I'll respond, and then Jake, you can come back to it, because I think Jessica, you've certainly thrown a lot of things out there. For me, the most important question that you asked that I do hope we really do get to is, where are we in this? Because I really think that's a great question. I don't agree with that Tom Robbins guy. To me, that Tom Robbins guy sounds like, essentially he's saying that that machine that Jake just showed us is created by humans, and it's, in a sense, it's humanity which has messed everything up. And almost he's talking as if these masters like Plato or Socrates or some expert are the people who had these bright, brilliant ideas that just get ruined by the proles. That's what I hear in this guy. And I understand why he came to that conclusion. I understand how failed revolutions and also the PSYOP machinery itself can create that kind of despair that says, regular people, don't go thinking about ideas because you're just going to fuck them up. So ideas are for the experts. Ideas are for the people who understand the beauty of ideas. I think he thinks he's one of them, and he isn't. But that's what he probably thinks. And I would actually say the opposite of what he's saying, that machine that Jake described wasn't created by humans, by the normal operation of regular people. That machine was created by a ruling class. In my case, I believe it's created by the capitalist class. It's part of their machinery of what Marx said, the ruling ideas, the ideas that rule society are literally the ideas of the ruling class, the class that's in power. And what Jake is kind of describing is one of the mechanisms that they're using to assure themselves of that. So I'll just say that I don't agree with anything that Tom Robbins just said. And I think the exact opposite, that the only way to get out of this is to put ideas back into the place where ideas actually are hatched and given birth naturally, which is within humans. And that means all of the humans. And if we can get this away from just the elites, then I think we have a shot. But I will say, where that question of where are we, I feel I'm in that washing machine that is being described there. Like, I'm in the spin cycle of a washing machine of lies and truths and lies and truths, that I'm literally being spun inside of it and trying to make headways of any of it. And that, I think, is what I was hoping to talk about today, which is, what do you do? Because I think I agree with Jake's overall analysis of what they have planned and how it's kind of constructed in that detail. I mean, maybe there's some part I could disagree with, but the overall mechanism of us being marshaled and being led and nudged and poked and threatened, cajoled into our own beliefs, and we think that they're our own when actually they're not our own. They were being put into us by a system. What do you do? How do you say what is truth in such a situation? And I think that's what I want to talk about today, because I feel very much a part, or rather both a part and a victim of this machine, and one who's trying to get out of it or stop it, or trying to find others to help end that machine of idea misinformation and malacting. But how does one? I do think truth is going to play a role in that. So that's what comes up for me.
I guess maybe I can try to hazard a synthesis of what you said and what Jessica read, and that is, so what I'm hearing you describe, Andy, is maybe I could have explicated my flow chart with this sort of lens, but it sounds like you remind me of what Horkheimer and Adorno called the culture industry, right? And so it's this idea that that ideas can be consumed, right, through the market, or right, that the ideas of the ruling class are reified through the products that we consume. And that doesn't just mean like the utilitarian products like commodities, but like art, right, and entertainment and things like that. And that we can, in the model that I described, right, they sort of refined that system in a way in which sort of there's there's a product for every different identity group, basically, right? And you can consume that identity and be self-actualized in it by reinforcing the dominant ideas of the state, of the ruling class, which have co-opted the ideas in a way that mirrors what Tom Robbins is sort of discussing, right? So whether he intended that, and I've never read the book, and from based on that little excerpt, I didn't get necessarily the impression that he was implying that it was one class or another that necessarily does that with ideas. But I do think that is a phenomenon uh, that recurs throughout history, and in that, right? I mean, the ideas do become distorted, and often at that point, however we get there, they are distorted for the purpose of perpetuating and reifying the ruling class power structure, right? And so I guess for today, then, what we're going to talk about then is not so obviously, yes, we're going to talk about truth. What is it, and how can we do our best to, identify it and try to act it out, but also, um, how do we approach ideas, uh, or to use the language I've already used, although I don't like the term consume ideas, right? To embody ideas in ways that do not distort or profane their actual meaning in truth or reality, right? And so I guess we'll sort of posit some ideas here.
And Jessica, why don't you go in since I
If I have anything to add, I feel like we should just dive into truth, and I know we're going to talk about like limited hangouts and stuff alongside that. So I don't know, like what's our inquiry here? What is truth?
Yeah. To somebody, I have a place to start on it, but to somebody
Okay,
else.
then you go. Yeah, you go.
Okay. So I've been thinking about this stuff a lot. And it is related to watching different people have disagreements, different people saying, RFK can't be trusted, or so and so is a psyop, and so is a psyop, and the question comes down to, like, because I feel like every one of us is in the washing machine, we are all. So the way Jake talked about it, he talked about white propaganda, gray propaganda, and black propaganda. And all of those, when you talked about them, white, gray, and black, I'm just going to, at this point, say, when I think about propaganda that you're referring to, that's stuff that has some direct connection to the state, and there's an intent behind it. It's that element of propaganda. But we also know we are all consumers and influenced by white, gray, and black propaganda of some sort. So I become myself, even if I'm not in the pay of CIA or pay of FBI. I myself become a propagator of the black propaganda or gray propaganda or white propaganda in one way, shape, or form. I can't imagine. I cannot escape that, because I live in that society, and so in some way, shape, or form, I'm going to play that role. But do I consider myself a psyop? I consider myself influenced by it, but I myself am not a psyop. I'm not a person who's in the state with the intent of reinforcing the state, even if some of my actions did, like when I did 6 or 7 years ago, thinking that building a reform caucus in my union was going to be a way of trying to. I was thinking I was fighting for workers' power, but that was not going to do it. I actually believe that kind of thing at this point reinforces the problems, even if I don't consider it that way. So it's, in a sense, I was caught in a lie, but I was not a state actor, and that matters to me. The state actors and the people who are actually in some way, shape, or form directly acting on behest of this. At the behest of the state is one set of people, but those of us trying to fight the state and take the state down and make a revolution, well, we can still be subjects to we are always subjects to those lies. So what do we do? Well, the first thing that comes down for me is not actually, like, I trust Jake, and I trust Jessica, and I trust Eduardo, and I trust Kenny, I trust Brandy, there's people here who I trust, who I know. And for me, when I think about truth, I don't think about truth as something that exists within me. I want to fight the state, and the one truth I can say is that the state is lying to me, and that the corporations and the ruling class is lying to me. Whatever they're telling me is being told to me to harm me. So how I'm going to find the truth? Okay, do your best, but I don't believe that I find it. I believe that we as those people fighting that come to it. And that the only thing I really believe in building is not finding the truth, but building networks of trust. And building networks of trust is not like, is something that happens in time. It happens through actions, through people seeing what other people do, like whether they actually do what they say. And that to me is, when I think about what we're trying to build, and when I think about the truth we're trying to find, it is not an idea. It's people, and it's connections, and it's connections built in time, and it's connections reaffirmed through people's own activities and actions, so that I don't have to have Jessica say everything that's true, or Jake say everything that's true. All I have to know is that there is, in time, because of how I see them and how I've perceived them and what I see them do and what we may do together in the future, I know that they're fighting the same battle as I'm fighting. We all are dealing with a combination of half-truths and a degree to which lies have sort of integrated themselves into us, into our own minds. But the truth is not something as an idea in my mind. The truth is our connection to each other and our desire to fight for our own liberation against an oppressive state, ruling class, capitalist class. That to me is where our truth is. Truth doesn't exist as an idea. It exists as an action of solidarity in taking down an existing state.
I have to think for a minute before I respond, but one thing that just popped into my mind is just that term, like networks of trust, and like, isn't it telling that, the spooky they, like that's often has been like their stated goal. Like, wasn't that like the World Economic Forum's like theme for the year or last year or something, was like literally trust. So yeah, but I have to think more about whether I agree with that definition of truth. So Jake or Ken, you can go.
I mean, I can share how I, like, at least, my sense of truth. It's a process, it's it's similar, like, that's what I think the process of revolution is important, how you do it, how, like, if it's democratic, what shapes it takes, what ideas get, value as a group. But at the same time, that is important, but I have my obligation to explore what I think is true. And to me, that comes through experience. Like, I wasn't born just mistrusting the state right away. I was actually indoctrinated like everyone else to, through the national anthem, through the pledge to the flag, all that bullshit, and it's taken experience, right? And inquisition and honesty to, in being completely wrong, like to come to this synthesis of where I'm at right now, and, like, obviously I've been wrong in the past in terms of, where I've been, ideologically, politically, whatever. But, for me, like, I think I'm a lucky person, like, I was born in a not very normal society, like, community. I wasn't normalized through the same channels that everyone else did, so I've been able to question certain things, beyond like what I'm supposed to do just because everyone else is doing it. And I'm also just stubborn, that's like kind of my own, like, I guess maybe gift, or I was born with that, of like, I have to know why. I just have to know why. And the more I gain experience, and the more I realize that, how little I know and how much I thought I knew everything, the more I realize I have to question and I have to ask more why, and I just don't have to go along with it, and, like, and for example, yes, I consider myself a Marxist, like, or a Marxian, like, to use Jeff's term, influenced by Marx, but, and like, I feel like it does explain a lot of the world, or how capitalism works and the mechanisms. I I don't have an answer how to build that future society. But there has been people who claim to be Marxists that have that answer, how to build that future society, and they impose it on people, right? And so they grab these ideas, and then they become what Tom Robertson maybe was hinting at, and so. But again, to me, it's a combination, right? Like there is my individual, responsibility to find out as to what I think is true, what my values are, and share them and be honest about them, because that is going to be a piece in the puzzle, of assembling that big idea that is collective, and hopefully it's for the better, But if it is wrong and if it's not okay, it's also my obligation to speak up and say it's not right, and I think that's regardless of whatever political system people claim to advance and champion, and so yeah, I mean that is how my process I think works until now. That's how I evolve with my ideas. That's what I hope to evolve in the future. To keep being that stubborn person, and I think I've been programmed to this point, of just asking a goddamn question, and because if it doesn't make sense, then I'm not gonna do it.
What? Go ahead.
I don't have anything big. No, I was just thinking, like, one turn of phrase that I have tried to use, and I feel like I've heard a few people use this. I don't know who to like attribute it to, but just over the past couple of years, like instead of saying, oh, like such and such is true, instead saying what I know to be true. Which is like, yeah, it's kind of semantics, but I do think it's kind of reflective of the type of mindset that we're kind of dancing around here, just in terms of like, you don't know until you know, right? Like, and just I don't know how to navigate all of this propaganda. Like all of us are learning, right? Like that's part of what we do on the show, is just try to kind of like work through these things together and hopefully make progress. And then also in terms of, Andy's networks of trust and building relationships and that kind of thing, right? Like, yeah, I mean, what do we do? Like, listen to all different perspectives, especially perspectives that you oppose, or think you oppose. Question everything, right? Especially that which you ostensibly agree with. Like, most of all, like I always emphasize that when I'm teaching argument, like when I'm teaching writing classes, of like, no, like the most amount of scrutiny that you should apply, right, is for the sources that you're using to back up your own argument or opinion. But I don't know, like I'm struggling, I guess. Like I agree with what Andy said earlier about truth kind of being a process, and not something that like something that you just like have or don't, or like encounter or don't. It's like something that you actually have to create in relationship with other people, or co-create. And I agree with that, but I feel like it's not like the whole story. So I don't know. I'm maybe by the end of this episode I'll figure out a way to articulate. But I think there's something. I think it's something to do with like sovereignty. That's another word that's come up a lot in like freedom groups and just the whole like anti-COVID space the past couple of years. But I think there's something there, like both on a personal and on a collective level, in terms of undertaking like the process of taking sovereignty over your own life. And I think, like, obviously, we're conditioned in terms of propaganda and stuff on an informational level, like in terms of critical thinking, like we're all just bullied, without any consent into outsourcing our intelligence, right? And like information, right? Experts, blah, 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 peer review, all of that. But we outsource everything. Like, it's not just the information aspect. Like, we outsource our health, we outsource our relationships, we outsource, in some respects, like our labor, like everything, right? And so I think there's something for me, like, about truth, or like the idea of truth that is inherent in one respect. Like it is something that's like that you have, like just by nature of being human, by nature of being like connected to nature. Like nature is true, right? Like the whole you know, was it Keats? I should know. Beauty is truth and truth beauty. Which I don't know. I mean, I guess it gets a little spiritual in that respect, but also on a practical level, like just the instincts that people have and how like terrible most of our population's instincts are. And I heard a term recently, instinct injury. It came up in one of the women's circles that I'm in, and I think it came from Sister Morningstar. Don't quote me on that. But just this idea that like our instincts throughout our lives, for most of us, especially in the Western world, like are repeatedly injured. And I thought it was kind of an interesting concept, because I think it works on multiple levels. Like it works in terms of the critical thinking and information level, but also in so many other respects. And like it could be like because of propaganda that it's injured, or it could be because of trauma. It could be like a whole host of different things. But I guess that's kind of how I see that process of taking sovereignty back, is kind of healing that like so-called injury to one's natural instincts. Because I actually am not like, I'm not as dark as like that Tom Robbins passage kind of sounds. Like I actually do think there's like good at the base of humanity, and I think there's truth there. But yeah, like we're all just so out of touch with like what it is to be human, and thus out of touch with truth, like whether it's a thing or an idea or a process or an action. All right, I'm just rambling. So Jake, please please jump in.
No, that did make sense. So I think it's good. So go ahead, Jake.
Okay, so a couple things here. So two things that I want to try to talk about separately and together at the same time. But I need to sort of separate them first in order to synthesize them. So two things that we've sort of concepts that we're sort of dancing around here. One is truth, and the other is trust. Okay, and Andy, you sort of said that for you, truth emerges through the process of trust, right? Or which means through the process of relationships, right? Authentic relationships with people that you, right, can trust, right? Because obviously you can have relationships with people that you might not trust so much. So first I need to say that. So I believe that truth is, right, something that is objective, right? And it's something that's objective and transcendent beyond, outside of whether or not I arrive at it through a relationship with someone that I trust. Okay. And that process could be a path towards, right, discovering the truth that's already exists, right? But, I think basic tools like, the three laws of logic, law of identity, non-contradiction, tautology, right? Like in terms of just sifting through data to come to conclusions, right? Like these three tools, right, should basically be our compass or our litmus test. Now, I can know something to be true based on those laws, right? A better way to say that is, right, I can know what's not true based on those laws. I think that's a more accurate statement. And what I mean by that is, right, if I can find a contradiction, I can know that that's incorrect. However it's been, right, however I have analyzed it, if it's contradictory, that is not a valid conclusion. All right, so I can objectively determine what is not true, right, and then from there, right, we could narrow down things that are at least plausible and most likely. But if I can, my ability to do that on my own doesn't mean that I can communicate it with other people, right? Even by using, right, laws of non-contradiction, right, non-contradictory data, or I could point out a contradiction, right? If somebody else has an emotional attachment to that idea, Jessica, you kind of alluded to, right, this oil situation, right? These essential oils, where it was like somebody gave you the data, they gave it to you in a way which it sounds like was convincing because you're convinced at this point. But at the time, right, you had some, it sounds like emotional or other, right, psychological attachment to it, right, where you the data, it's the same data now as it was then, but at that time, right, you didn't want to go with it, right? So in other words, right, my ability or that person's ability to demonstrate the truth of something does not guarantee the ability to communicate it. And this is where, Andy, I can agree with what you're saying about sort of the relationship between trust and truth, and in terms of truth becoming manifest in society in a way where, right, lies are not the dominant culture, right, where lies are not what steers all these society at large, or, to use that model, all the different little echo chamber identity groups that are all, right, bouncing off of each other, right? And so if the goal here is to, right, transform the trajectory we're on, right, this great reset, this right, this careening towards this totalitarian technocracy, right, if it's not enough for me to know the truth, or for any number of individuals to be able to definitively, or at least, right, clearly enough know its truth, you have to be able to communicate it with other people in a way where you can develop the solidarity and the trust that you're talking about, where, right, you can all collectively, right, civilly disobey the mandates, just as one example, right? And the key here, though, it's not just to be able to communicate it within those different identity groups that, right, I sort of mapped out in the flow chart, or the Aquino sort of lays out in his mind for, right? Because as long as you're in that echo chamber, then, right, then we still have competing echo chambers, right, rather than just competing individuals. So, and then those groups, as in the previous episode we discussed, right, can be steered and sort of divided and escalated into conflicts to sort of synthesize the next step in the process. So really, right, what is most important is the ability to know at least definitively what is not true, to be able to, right, narrow down what is potentially true, and not have not overstate the case, not believe in something more than you have the evidence to prove, right? That is its own thing. That's just sort of the epistemological level, right? Then there is basically the level of relationship, right? And at that point, that's where we need to be able to communicate it across those lines of those various identity groups. Okay, and in that, right, is where you might say that we create sort of what coalesces is, as a Marxist you would call it, like, class consciousness, right? Now, I mean, my dear friend Charlotte, who's no longer with us, right, was not in the same class as me economically, right? Right? I mean, her folks were, the Order of Skull and Bones, and you know what I mean, was worked for the Reagan administration, Department of Education, Department of State, pretty wealthy, okay, like, but I never felt like we were in different classes, right? Like, because what we shared was our perspective on, right, this resisting this great paradigm, this great reset, right? And so, but I still think that's sort of a class consciousness. It's basically it is a consciousness of relationships with people who don't want to live in that totalitarian society, right? And I think that might, span more than just what would be traditionally understood in Marxism as the working class, right? Maybe I might just call it like the moral class or something like that, right? But the idea here is that, right, we need to be able to communicate across those those lines. And I think once that happens, I think that sort of it takes on a life of its own, right? Like I don't, I mean, just I know you do a lot of organizing, and I haven't been to Workers and Students for Choice in a long time, but like I I see that, and sort of some of the other, like some of the socialist groups are with, like that type of organizing. I think is a different type of organizing than what I'm sort of alluding to here, which is where, right, we just by finding ways to communicate across these artificial echo chambers, that this class consciousness emerges, and that through these relationships then whatever action happens next, right? Like, if you don't really need to organize a group if everybody in your neighborhood agrees that mandates are no good, right? Everybody just walks in the store and says, nah, I mean, and when everybody walks in the store together, I mean, there's not a whole lot that can be done. And so I think just, practically then the discussion, we could get some headway in the discussion in terms of trying to think about what is it that prevents people from communicating across those echo chambers, and what are some practical things we can do to not just try to communicate with the other side, but to be aware of our blind spots, and whatever other presuppositions or emotional sort of hangups we have about the presuppositions that we carry when we try to communicate. And I think if we could maybe hash that out, that something useful might emerge from that.
Well, yeah, for me, first off, I know I started this conversation into the truth thing, but do understand that for me, this is a work in progress. So one of the things that's even changed as I've listened to Jessica and Kenny and Jake, it's helped hearing you, is Kenny and Jessica introduced this term of sovereignty that I didn't mention when I talked about truth. But actually, I think it's fundamental. The issue of freedom is fundamental to the notion of truth, because for me, what we're taught, look, there's how I truly feel or things like that, which are important. But this discussion of truth for me is intimately connected to the fight for liberation, because I believe we don't just live in a sea of lies, we live in a prison. And the notion of a prison is connected to the lies. So they're constructed we live in the in an intellectual sphere of lies, because we are actually in a physical prison, and those things are it's both the idea of it and the actual living in it are connected. So for me, truth when as we're speaking of it here, is intimately connected to to liberation, to the idea of all of us becoming free. Now, Charlotte Iserby, let's talk about her for a second, because she is from that other group that I believe is those oppressors, but I would call her a class traitor. I would say she was a traitor to the prison that was being constructed by Reagan and them once she became a whistleblower on Project Best. And what she becomes even more likely a person I might listen to as opposed to not trust is because of my relationship with Jake and what I've come to know of him. And even though I'm a communist and I believe the working class is the thing, the working class must be connected in a particular way and through trust and blah, 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 and that it needs to take down capitalism, and Jake doesn't believe that, I do believe that Jake hates this system and hates the state as much, if not more, than me. And I believe he would be just as interested in taking it down. I just think I have a particular idea about how that goes, and I think he has a particular idea about how that goes. And I think we're only going to realize what's true when all of us, that includes people far to the right of Jake and maybe even far to the left of me, come to some common understanding, not just of what it is in our head, but in reality, I actually believe that truth is an act before it's a belief. And that the true thing that is done is people refuse to do the mandates, like the community that, no, we're going to the store, we're doing whatever, we're going to our work, we're doing work. That is the truth. That's freedom in action. And then out of that, to me, comes the idea of like, okay, what do we believe? What does this mean for us? What is liberty? What is human? But I don't think we can find any of those things in this sea of lies we live in. and in this prison we are actually imprisoned in. So it does that. I don't want to become powerless to the point of, well, we're stuck in this prison. So I look at truth as the act of liberation, and that's why, to me, it's never. And my issue with people who say, well, that I don't agree with that person, they got to go. I don't agree with that person, they got to go. Is it makes it seem as if truth is embodied in a single person, or it's embodied in an individual text. I think socialists had a tendency to look at it as Lenin. And I love the writings of Lenin. Even Marx, I've really appreciated some of the writings of Marx, but we've made that mistake of putting that into a single text or a single individual. And I don't buy that anymore. You know, and many people make a big issue of like Lenin's April thesis about revolution coming to Russia without talking about the fact that there were thousands of workers who had already come to that idea. And Lenin just said, was the guy who, it was not a small thing to what he did. But what is left out is the fact that when he spoke of, we need to make a revolution here in Russia, there were workers in the factory of the metalwork factories in the Vyborg district who had already come to that conclusion and had already started to move away from the Bolshevik party that was thinking that's not the way it's supposed to go, until Lenin turned it that way. So when Lenin turns it that way, all these workers over here were like, yeah, fuck yeah, that's what we were thinking all along. Then they become activated, not because Lenin said, but they'd already believed that. That was their own actions coming into it. I don't want to get too much into the Russian Revolution, but that's what I mean is that it is, there's truth is not embodied and to be found in any one person. It is, to me, it is found in the collective act of liberation. And I will listen to any oppressed person from well, I hope this is my values, whether I do it or not, we'll see. I am open to listening to any oppressed person, the people on this side of the class line generally, who, even if they really disagree with what I'm saying, or I really disagree, I'm open to listening to them. But I'm not going to talk to Joe Biden. I'm not going to talk to some board of supervisors person. I don't want to talk to them. I don't. I'll talk to Charlotte Iserby because Jake said she's a class traitor. He didn't say it, but that's essentially what he's saying. And I'm like, yeah, let's talk to her, because that's a woman who can be listened to, and she actually knows some of what those fuckers are doing. You know, so that's what I mean when I say I'm open. I'm open to talking about any oppressed person anywhere on the field. That's what I hope to project, and that's what I think we need to do. But there will be people I don't want to listen to, because I feel like they're part of the David Copperfield class of trying to make me think up is down and blue is green. So I'm not going to listen to them, because all they're trying to do is throw sand in my eyes, as opposed to a person who's on the right who is also trying to make their way, but just has a different truth. You know, so that's what I mean.
Kind of makes me think of I guess this is like the participatory truth and the participatory liberation in a way. Like, it's just a better manifestation of like the darker side of that, where like propaganda and PSYOPs only, especially in contemporary times, like they only really work if they are participatory, like with all of the COVID stuff, right? Like if it was just the white, I'm now mixing them up. If it's just the white propaganda, right? Like it's so much easier to see through and dismiss. And like, again, like if you have even just semi like strong, healthy instincts, right? Like even most people would be able to see through that. But when it gets mixed up and it's just so like it was, especially the COVID stuff, like it was just so participatory, you know. Everybody became police, everybody became spies, everybody became class traitors. Not everybody, but that's what it felt like. Yeah, and I was gonna ask too, because I know controlled opposition came up like at the end of the last episode, and then you brought it up again, I think at the beginning of this one, Andy. So I was thinking, as you were talking a little bit about that term as well, and how like we all have our blind spots, I think. So in a way, like, I don't know, are we all controlled opposition? I think maybe. I don't know. What do you guys think about that term?
I kind of do think that, but that's my first go. We are all levels. I mean,
I'm not saying that like somebody who's overtly being, you know, who has like really bad motives or whatever, or their, whether it's like funding or power or whatever, should like be listened to and that like everyone's on an equal plane. But I do think in some sense like we're all limited hangouts. Like even the show, I don't know.
Well, I mean, the term implies, as Andy sort of pointed out, like intentional mis or disinformation artists, right? And maybe a better term is we're all useful idiots at some point, in some way, right? Because
Okay, I can live with that.
And that's sort of what I laid out in the previous episode, and that's sort of what I tried to show in the flow chart, is that which is the intention of what Aquino lays out in Mind War, is that, right, every possible method of resistance can in some way be co-opted and steered. It kind of reminds me, I just thought of this off the top of my head, hopefully this isn't a bad analogy, but if you've ever seen The Matrix, the second one, and you remember the architect, he's that computer head, which by the way is a Gnostic term it refers to the demiurge, but I don't want to get on the whole thing about Gnosticism, but that's what it is. But he's like, so Neo's in there and he's gonna stop. He's gonna, I forget what the mission is. He's got to either stop them from doing something or save Trinity, right? And when he goes and he gets in that room with the architect, who's like the super brain of the whole Matrix computer, and he shows him all these screens, and each screen is like all the different ways that Neo tried to subvert the system, right? And in each one of them, he always has this this dilemma where you can either shut down the Matrix or you can save the girl. And it's sort of like, I mean, like, to use as a cheesy analogy, I mean, like, that's, I think, the level, especially with when the amount of predictive analytics that they have in our building tours, is that, right, if we can categorize it and we can data mine the people that we can put in the category, then, right, we have at least several options of how to take any authentic quest to discover truth or to resist, and we can steer it, and right, we can, even if it's just a bit of a nudge, right? And to that extent, I mean, I guess we're all right. We're all sort of like this, which means you're going to bump into a wall here and there, right? It's kind of the idea of like getting in the ring. Like, if you think you're going to get in the ring and not get hit, I mean, sometimes it happens. Sometimes you might knock the guy out, early on or whatever. But if the fight goes any amount of time, even with vast differences in skills, like, you're probably going to get touched, right? You're probably going to eat at least one punch. I mean, and so it's just sort of the nature of, what is psychological operations and effectively counterintelligence.
Yeah, I mean, because my mind is, goes to, like the enemy of one of the biggest enemies of truth, the collective truth, or, like, it's censorship. I think we've talked about it, and that was understood right under Lenin, right? For when there was debate, and you have to have debate, you have to have open conversation, you have to have, hash those things out. And, I think that's like the scariest thing. And that's why I tend to be more afraid. I understand, like there's opposite sides, right? But they're all working towards the same end. But I am more afraid of those who don't find a problem with, censoring people, just because that automatically is a massive hammer, in the hands of whoever wields power. Whether it's this state or Stalin's state, and so, and then that connects to like the question that was posed here, in terms of how do we cross those lines, right, to those other echo chambers, because you know, in the process of coming to a truth is a long, it's, you know, especially when you have to debate and all these things. But I think there are some fundamental things just like that, like opposing censorship, you know, that because that in itself, if censorship is not opposed, then it immediately cuts the legs of, you know, the process of, you know, making connections and that will yield some positive result, you know, collective result. And so, you know, but that's I guess my where my head goes, because, you know, I have so many people that haven't, you know, that are good, have, you know, a lot of great values, that care about humans, but they don't see a problem with just canceling people, censoring people, you know, shutting them out just because they have feelings about it, you know, and like we know, we, you know, those feelings can be manipulated through the stuff that we consume. And so, you know, like, and so I guess for me, I was cheating on the previous episode. I was talking about how, like, I was thinking about it too, and it's like sometimes I do force myself to listen to people that produce a feeling on me, because sometimes I know that my feelings have been, you know, tampered with, right? Like they've been injured, like you know, Jessica said that, you know, that, you know, I do have to, I trust myself more and more the more experience I get, the more I discover of things that I know weren't true in my search for truth, right? Like it's a constant thing. It's not like an absolute one thing, you know, and I can't pretend that I alone possess it, you know, because then I will be that dictator eventually, you know. And but again, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's where my mind is at, you know, and because I think that is supremely important, you know, to fight against, because for example, in ours, the four of us here, you know, at some point I had doubts, you know, when Jake came into the room, and I was like, is he a right winger? You know, like that was, you know, like, is he a Christian right winger? You know, like that's what my mind was on. But like I was programmed, you know, like I was programmed into that. But like the process of talking to you and actually like sticking with it, because at times it was hard to understand you, Jake, and like it's hard for some people to understand. But now, like when I stuck with it, now I understand what you're saying. You know, like and so. But if I had canceled you, censored you, then, you know, I would have lost that piece of the puzzle.
I totally agree. And I think in a way like that censorship thing of like convincing people that it's somehow like not a violation of free speech to shut down conversations that threaten public health and according to so-and-so, or, you know, whatever examples, or threaten democracy, to convince people that that is fine and not fascist is like the ultimate propaganda success, right? And I mean, I don't really know what to do about that, like with those groups of people, because at that point it's like, well, if you can't have a conversation, like where do you go from there? I don't know. What do you think, Andy?
Well, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think, let me come back. I hope I come back to that question. What do you do about that? But I mean, first off, I had the same, perhaps to a lesser degree, I had the same sort of initial doubts when I first started talking to Jake, you know, like, oh, it's just different. You know, what's that over there? You know, but I also knew I was drawn to it because I knew that it was like, he knew something about a whole area of the world of information, mostly coming, I would say, from the right, even though Jake doesn't claim right. And he shouldn't, he doesn't have to. I claim left, you know, and so anybody to the left of me was right. I don't want to, but he was kind of over there. And I had my initial like suspicions or even kind of hesitation that was built in. But in addition to that, there were people around me who I know and have known who said, are you sure you should be talking to that guy? Or they said, are you sure? There are other people who said, are you sure you should be talking to Allison? And there were other people who said, are you sure you should be talking to that Catholic teacher who seems far right? You know, or are you sure you should be, who was the other person? Well, those are some of the first three. that came off.
Probably me.
The
Well,
Trump voters. The Trump voters. They
oh
didn't
yeah,
want
Trump voters. But I do want to talk about Jessica and Kenny and Eduardo. No one ever questioned me about talking to Eduardo and talking to Jessica or talking to Kenny, because the only people they were concerned about me talking about are people who appeared, maybe they had influence, maybe they had, but if they didn't have influence, the question was, why are you talking to them? Like, who are they? That would be Kenny, that would be Eduardo and Jessica, and that would almost be me in some ways. It's like, we don't matter because we don't have some sort of like thing. We don't have like a thing we're known for, a book or a website or blah, blah, blah. And I'm not putting that against you, Jake. I think it's to your credit. I'm just saying this is the way others often saw it, is like, you're either, why are you talking to that person? Because they might be trying to steer you somewhere. Or why are you talking to those people? Do they really matter? Like, they don't have any power. You know, those are the two ways that this conversation goes. And I think they're both wrong. Like, for me, it's the people without power that are the most important people to talk to, first off. And secondly, that, like, thank God I didn't listen to the people who kind of were trying to steer me and say, are you sure you want to do that? Talk to Jake or Allison or anyone. And who tried to kind of get me into think that maybe they were part of a controlled opposition. They didn't put these words, but controlled opposition or limited hangout or part of a PSYOP, if you will. And I just think that is what censorship, when we embrace it, is the act of accepting our isolation. It's accepting the fact that we are going to be separated from each other in all sorts of ways. And so I'm just glad we're talking about that now, because the movement has absorbed censorship as a medium in many, many ways that I don't think we're aware of, particularly when we say, you got to go, don't listen to him, don't talk to that person. That's what I believe. And I do think you got to talk to that person. You don't have to agree to that person, but I do think you got to talk with that person. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, and I think people's ideologies and worldviews are so unbelievably weak right now that it's almost like the same like fear of contagion from a health perspective with ideas. It's like they're terrified that you might like catch a right-wing idea or something. Like, I have to put on my syllabi every time for every class almost, I have to put a clause. Well, I feel I have to put this clause just to protect myself, that like reading a text or assigning a text does not equate to an endorsement of everything in that text. And this is like difficult for a lot of students to grasp, because they think like, oh, you're making me read this thing. Like I made my gender studies students read like the J.K. Rowling essay, you know, because it was like hot topic at the time. And it was like, oh, but like, she's a transphobe. So like, you know, and it's like, you can still read it. Like, is your ideology that weak that you can't defend yourself? Well, then we have a different problem. And I feel like it's the same with people. Like, talking to someone is not an endorsement of everything they say. Like, you're just having a conversation.
I just want to comment. I don't know, Jake, you also haven't said it. Do you want to respond?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Just about that, you know, like, I think there's another element there for me, you know, because like I'm the one here who didn't finish college. You know what I mean? Like, and so there is a level, like, obviously we're, at least that's how I think about it. Like, we're normalized, right, in how to expect knowledge and learning, right, in school. And so authority is given to the professor, to the teacher, right? And so we're supposed to default, and they are, you know, they're gonna give us something, you know, like in terms of like fill us up. And so that's something that has changed, and I absolutely have gained like a very high degree of confidence, you know, just to stand in a room. Like, I don't give a fuck that you have college degrees. You know, I care about what you have to say, and if it makes sense, you know, like, and so I don't care, like, you know, if you're being validated by an institution or not. And if anything, I've learned to question those people more, because, you know, they tend to have more blind spots, and because they believe in their own authority, you know, they're not going to be willing to listen to someone who's not educated. You know, like my mother, who said from day one, I don't fucking believe this COVID bullshit came from a fucking bat. You know, and you know, like from day one. but no one would believe her, right? She's an idiot. Long story, I just wanted to comment on that because I think that's also an important thing that I want to encourage and empower people to do is like, no, like they have a piece, they have a particular frame of analyzing things. That's what you go to school for. Doesn't mean you have an absolute truth or absolute knowledge. Doesn't mean you're devoid of biases. And that goes with anyone, especially the people, again, with authority and uniforms and things like that. And that's something that I learned through experience as a kid, because I've seen so many people in these positions, whether it be religious, the coercive apparatus, politicians, all this stuff, teachers too, who were completely wrong, and so, that's something that's going to have to go too, that these like, bowing down to intellectual authority, so-called experts, like, of course you'll listen, but, that's what I am a proponent of. You have to be your own intellectual. You have to believe in that, that you are it, and like, and also in that like process, analyze as to why it is, that you've been told that you're dumb, that your ideas don't matter, where someone else's ideas matter more, and that's again why I believe consider myself a communist, not because of fucking Stalin or that shit that people have a sense of. It's because community, like we have to hash it out. We determine our futures, and we have to find the truth together. Like we have to find what's true for us, but everyone has to be individually honest, and be willing to listen and shape that process, but that's, again, bringing it back to censorship. That's why that's so corrosive. That's the biggest enemy of any sort of change for anybody, regardless of what ideological place you're at, because that will be used against you. And that's the one thing I tell people, like, I don't give a shit what side of it, if you're supporting that, you are, forging the hammer that is going to come on your head or someone that someday.
Yeah, well, I mean, and, part of the phenomenon of why people call for, censorship of wrong thing from whichever angle, various, echo chamber groups are coming from is because, to go back to that flow chart, so they're data mining our behaviors online based on our identity categories. But in particular, what they're really looking at in terms of how the data comports with a given identity group is what makes you mad, what makes you scared, right? I mean, those are the two big ones, right? And those, if you can make people, and Aquino discusses this, right? Basically, those are the two strongest motivators, right? And if you can make people angry and scared, you can spur them into action. And one of those actions can be no, don't let that person talk, right? Because another part that's scary is when your paradigm, when your framework is challenged, right? Because Andy and I have talked about this a lot. When we're trying to figure out stuff that both of us admittedly don't really know what to make of it, he'll say, from a Marxist perspective, this is how I look at it. And I would say something like, well, from a Christian perspective, this is how I look at it. Or, analyzing it from the New World Order framework, this is how I look at it, right? And we've explicitly discussed this meta level of our own conversations, which is that we have to use framework in order to organize the data to begin with. I mean, and that's how the PSYOP, in that flow chart, that's how the PSYOP begins. You have to have categories to put the data in before you can sort it out. And you have to sort it out before you can move it where you want to move it, okay? Now, that doesn't mean that your framework is necessarily right? But it does mean that, right, if you don't have some sort of a priori categories to hang the data on, you just have, right, random data points with the patterns in there will not emerge in any obvious manner, right? So we all rely on what we'll just call the framework, okay? Whether it's political or philosophical or religious or whatever it is. And it's just that's the nature of the mind, right? Like you can't think without it. You always have to come to any data set with some form of a presuppositional or a priori category. Now, if we're in the habit of not questioning that framework, and then the presuppositions we have about the framework, right? Because right, so Andy, right, you have a Marxist framework, right? But right, you've shifted in many ways, right? I mean, like, right, you don't organize with the same people, which means, right, like you still have the same framework, but you have different suppositions about it, right? So for somebody else that's not willing to look at the framework from that, like to question the presuppositions, if somebody challenges it in a way where they're like pointing out some clear contradictions, the natural response is fear or anger, because what you're doing to the person is you're saying, you can't have that, you can't use that framework. Well, now it's chaos. All the data that they thought, well, this goes here and this goes here, and then I order my life around it, all that stuff goes crazy. And then they're like, well, what do I do now? So, instead of having to do the tough mental work of rethinking the framework and the presuppositions, right? You just get angry at the person, right? Because don't take that away. This is how I organize stuff, right? And then what happens is, don't let that person talk, right? So I think that, fundamentally, one of maybe the practical strategies for approaching not just how to understand all the sea of lies and various forms of information, misinformation, and disinformation, but also to communicate across the echo chambers, is to not only be constantly and consciously willing to, right, be aware of your framework, be aware of your presuppositions, and be flexible and like, okay, do I need to reconsider something about the framework or the presupposition? And then when you're communicating with people who challenge yours, right, and who or people who are very emotionally attached to their own, right, and this gets back to what Andy, you were saying about just this idea of liberty and sovereignty, or what I might just call the golden rule, right, allowing everybody's right to have the framework that they have, to not prejudge the person's humanity based on their framework, to not be overly emotional, even if they get emotional, because you understand that they have it's a sensitive topic to ask them to question their paradigm, and being able to go through that process with the person, and that's how that relationship and that trust is built, is by, right, just acknowledging that, right, we all have those paradigms, right, and that people will have emotional responses, but if you don't escalate it with your own emotional response, I mean, that's that might be an effective way for that person to consider analyzing their own frame, right? Because it's like they'll get, if they have an emotional reaction to you, but you're still calm and polite and civil and respectful to them, right? They might, over time, they'll be like, okay, well, this person's not forcing me to do anything, right? They're kind to me. They still are, they're still willing to talk to me. Maybe I should think about what that person said, and maybe I shouldn't have this fear or animosity of that person. And then from that, hopefully, what emerges is, right, Kenny, what you described in terms of how you kind of came around to having the right wing Christian guy that is me on your podcast, right? So.
Yeah, another thing I think along with that, which maybe gets us back to the truth thing, is like whether people are consciously working within a framework or outside of it, whatever that would look like. I think a lot of people are thinking that most of the ideas that they have and the opinions and the decisions that they make are their own. And I think most of them aren't, right? And I think that it creates like this false attachment, right, of like all of these things, which a lot of them are coming from propaganda or are coming from culture or a framework even, and then they sort of become like attached to like what people think of as like yourself, but it's really not. It's like, I mean, even just practically, like under capitalism, like who has time to like figure out who they are, right? But then if you want to go deeper than that, like I think whether spiritually or physically or whatever, like I don't think most people really like know who they are. Like they don't have a ton of original ideas. I'm saying they and you, but I mean I'm speaking from my own experience. Like I feel like a lot of the stories that I had like about myself, or like the the things that we're told that we need to be happy or to be healthy, or um about the government, whatever, like most of it's not like actually our own, whether you want to say like truthful or just like it's not, it doesn't really belong to you, right? Yeah.
Well, I think for me, like Jessica, you sort of started with that story of the person who told you some things about oils that you didn't, because that what you were describing there, I feel like was what Jake was kind of talking about that sort of fear response, the challenge, and you needed your own time to kind of go through it. Because I do think, Jake, you're right about how it messes with people's heads. It's very frightening. I personally think it's also frightening to oppose a state which is frightening itself. Like that, like, and people know, like in around the COVID narrative and things like that, they know that if they buy into some of the oppositional views we have, oh, I get to be as isolated as Brandy and Andy are. That's awesome. I get to, they know that. So, but put it, even that aside, I actually think, Jake, you're speaking about another thing is people's, when their framework starts to is collapsed, that's a very frightening and a very unstable position for a person to be in. But Jessica, one of the things that I feel like has been so valuable to have you here, and why I respect you so much, and I respect all of you here, but when I think about you, the episode you talked about veganism, you are enter into it, and then you're kind of exit from it, and as not as if you went one way and just the other way, but as part of a, like, I just feel like that's very natural. I feel like that's very normal. That to me seems human, like, and truthful and honest in terms of, it was true of me here, it's still true of me there, but I went through a process, and I just feel like there's something, I really believe in that, because I feel like I've gone through that myself. And like, Kenny, you said, I remember you saying sometime in this episode, I was wrong, and I kind of thought to myself, well, when haven't I been wrong? Like, I was every step along my way, I kept on being wrong. So where am I now? Like, am I right now? All I can say is I do feel more integrated personally, but I have a feeling my views are going to continue to change. I know that meeting Jake has meant that I don't believe in organized building the left any longer. I believe in fighting for revolution, and I believe Jake will be part of that process. So I don't believe in building the left. I believe in fighting for revolution. I believe from Jessica, that story that kept sticking with me, that challenged my belief, was the story of the 14 women you were organizing with in your yoga group. And I'm like, when I came to the notion of, well, which one of them gets sacrificed, if you will, has to kind of like get used up or get thrown aside in order for us to have a revolution. And I said, I don't think we can have, because if we have a revolution like that, then it's built on a lie, and you can't build it on that kind of lie, and that's in some ways a new view for me, because I've read about revolutions where you had to crack a few eggs kind of thing. I'm not a pacifist, and I do believe there is a liberatory aspect to some kind of violence. I think violence can be liberatory if we all understand what we're doing, and then when I think about Allison, like, I definitely was more like working class, get the machines going. Let's get the tools of the means of production in the hands of workers. I have real questions about that as a result of some of the discussions we've had with Allison about much more feeling like whatever this revolutionary process is feels more like a return to some kind of indigenous nature or state or of a way of existence. Doesn't mean you can't have buildings around and shit, but things are going to have to return to a kind of humanity that they have really gone away from. That I did not find that there was the language of alienation in Marx, but I don't, and I still believe that alienation is a feature of capitalism. That's why we have to get rid of it, because it separates us from ourselves as well as from each other. But that process to me feels different now as a result of a lot of our discussions with Allison. So all these things have slowly shipped things down, and there's other changes. Um, I, I just don't believe in anything else. I believe that we change, and that's why I don't believe that truth is in one person, because I certainly don't contain it, and I'm not sure anybody else does. And I think everyone is like me. They've been wrong every time in the past, and it's all their wrong things that led them to a better thing that they're at. So I don't know. That's rambling myself.
I mean, there's a couple things like about being wrong, like that is part of the process. And for me, and it's whether, like, again, you're willing to question that framework, like, Jake said, that's because you can be wrong, but some people double down, or and that is obviously nothing productive. But I guess what I was thinking about is, in this process of searching for whatever, our truth, or a way to move forward, a way to create the world that we imagine, or maybe fighting this world that we don't think is right, what is happening, where we're heading. Like, like, I think there's also where I'm at right now, wrestling with, like, too much information, and getting lost in that, right? Because I think that in itself gets us, from, at least from my own experience, some fundamental truth that I think it's in every human. It's like just being, like existing, and I think that that's the thing that I try to balance, right? Because, like, it's exhausting to do this, right? Like, and it's exhausting to be isolated. It's exhausting to be honest, with yourself. It's exhausting to be honest with people you don't agree. And so, but I think that in itself can, like, just staying too long, too much, all the time in this, it deviates you from your search. And I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's like, it's such a difficult thing, because there is an authentic you, right? Like, a you who's not anxious all the time, a you who's doing what they want to do, a you who just wants to exist in peace with the people you love. And so I guess that's the part of this process that I'm wrestling with, of searching for truth while keeping myself, because I still have a life to live, and it's not just up to me. And so I guess those are the questions that come up for me in terms, of this conversation, because that is something that I don't have an answer to, that I wrestle with every day. Yeah.
Well, that's important to point out, though, because I kind of, all those things are exhausting, and then what's also exhausting is, I always try, knowing what I've laid out in terms of this, my analysis of echo chambers, and emotional attachments, and psychological operations. Like, I've been on probably as broad a spectrum of flavors of podcasts and shows as you could come up with, as far as right and left and new age and Christian, and right. And you know I am always being true to myself, but I'm always trying to not just, right, like, I don't sit here and preach the gospel every time I'm on a show that is right, that does not have a Christian foundation, right? Because I have a message that I want to communicate, right? And I'm talking to somebody that doesn't have that framework, and so I don't want my message to get lost, because, right, they're looking at my framework instead of my message, right? So on top, so it's like, so for me, it's this constant juggling of, like, how do I say what I mean, be truthful, but how do I say it in a way where I don't want to alienate the other side, but how do I, right? And that is mentally exhausting. And then trying to sift through all of the information that's constantly coming in new, and then it's not just that it's constantly new information, but then it's, right, all this layers of, right, how much of it is disinformation, right? And so all that together, now it's, it's, we have to communicate, right? And right, we do have to, avoid the narratives that they're pushing, so we do have to deconstruct the narratives, and so we do have to engage in these ways. But I often wonder that, that is that just sort of a reactionary process that even your best efforts to engage in that dialectic necessarily moves it forward. And in other words, right, what you're saying is, right, you find it valuable and meaningful and important to just unplug from it entirely, right? Like to just like just to be a human, right? To just have just to hang out with family and friends, like to be out in nature, be still, right? I mean, right? Like have a a normal life, right? Outside of this whole paradigm that we're constantly wrestling with. And I think this gets back to what Andy's saying, kind of about like Andy, you say your idea of a revolution is moving towards an idea of sort of like a return to some indigenous state, which is sort of on the same spectrum, right? It's like it's not to necessarily like which I think you probably would agree, especially like maybe a lot of the lefties that you don't communicate with as much anymore, or right these people that well, if we just take over the state, then we'll be in charge, and then right like it's not that type of thing. I think it's, and this gets back to also what I was saying about when you create the relationships across the echo chambers, right, through just regular stuff, right? Like, I mean, obviously we want to be aware of this narrative, but like just having like a real like community, like, right, like knowing that like we're friends, like, and if it's ever, supply chains run out or whatever, like, I'll feed you, you'll feed me, and then we'll find a way to make it. And, if we got to go homestead, we'll go homestead. To me, I think that's really the only viable option in some way, because as I laid out in the previous episode, they want to stir up some kind of a conflict, and right, the more the more violent it can be, the more it can look like an insurrection is the term they like to use after January 6th, right? That's momentum they can use, but right, like what Kenny, you're sort of talking about, and what Andy's sort of hinting at, and what I'm kind of dancing around, is that, right, just like finding ways to like have communities like live our lives outside the system and just detach from it, that thing potentially becomes not just a parallel structure, but right, I mean, I don't want to say parallel society, but just sort of like almost like an Amish 2.0, or right, some sort of right. We're not gonna, if we fight, then right, we're engaging and reacting. If we just go do our own thing, then right, they don't have anything to grab onto at all, right? And now instead of we're having to react to what they're doing, they have to react to what we're doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, just to speak on that last point, I think that's often the danger, and it's often what happens with any sort of like alternative, like even the stupid analogy of the essential oils, like literally it's replicating antibiotics, like it's the same concept, right? And so yeah, like I think we always have to be cognizant of not just like my Muay Thai kickboxing instructor always used to say, like, respond, don't react, right? So not just like having the same response but opposite, like especially emotional reaction, or from more of a societal, like whether it's a parallel society or whatnot. So yeah, and I really liked how you put it, Kenny, a little bit earlier, just that comment you made about like there is like a you that's happy and healthy and not like anxious and exhausted and all of it, right? And I really like that concept of like that exists, like it's already in you. So what, like, how can we alter the conditions both individually and collectively to bring that out, like for ourselves and then for everybody? I think that's a really helpful framework. And then the only other thing I wanted to add, just in terms of like communicating across different mediums and obviously political philosophies and stuff, is like I think especially now, like we're in this culture of I mean, part of it's the celebrity culture, but I don't think it's even just that. Just this like putting people on pedestals, like even in our personal lives, like our mentors and our friends and whatnot. And I think that's part of the problem of like not being able to respect somebody and, you know, or even just glean like some information, or, you know, you maybe take on a little bit of their ideology because it works for you, or it furthers like your relationship to the world or politics, but without having to like 100% be behind them. And I think there's just a lot of that in our culture, like particularly in the US and the West in general, of like hero worship and like you know, and even like outside of like pop culture and politics, like I think of like I had to do like, you know, a hero project in like the 6th grade or whatever, where you like you had to pick your American hero, right? And like write about why they were so great. And I mean, it's wonderful to have, you know, to know people throughout history that you respect, and you can see how they furthered freedom or whatever, right? Value. And then obviously in your life. But I don't think like the idea of putting people on pedestals is ever helpful. Like, yes, have mentors, have teachers, like take whatever is helpful from anyone. But I think that's a big part of the problem as well. Yeah. I don't know. That was not a good note to end on. Someone say something more.
No, I actually think it is. I think it is because first, because I just agree with that notion of pedestal versus connection. Those are very different things. And no one here, like what I really value. I was tired from work today, and you know I was just like, oh God, what's left? And I don't know if what I have to say. And I thought about it, but honestly, this conversation has really. I have a lot. I mean, part of it is I had some Coke in this thing, so like not like Coca-Cola. So it has some caffeine, so I know that helps. But but this conversation has really just kind of given me energy because it has been sort of exciting and freewheeling, and it's shifted. There's been shifting ideas for me, and I know Jessica, you triggered me with Tom Robbins, and you know, like, and I
I'll
was
just use
kind
some different passages because I think there's some.
I was able to work through that, you know. But it was just I don't know. I just really value this. We have this, you know, because that's what this is about. Is but not just in boxes, ultimately in physical space, you know. But this is the kind of thing I do believe in, and it's nice to experience it so that and I think what we're doing is we're just sharing this with others because the people who listen to us don't necessarily agree with Jake, Andy, Jessica, or Kenny, but are going to be like, they're going to figure out, I think what we hope is they figure out where they fit within this discussion and how do they take this discussion and take it into their community. And we just see, but I do believe it's people's ideas that are going to liberate us, not whoever those fuckers are who created that thing that Jake showed us in the beginning. You know, like those people have nothing to do with this. Or they should not have anything to do with it because they're not about liberating anything. So I'm just glad I'm able to talk with you all, and I miss Eduardo, but it's just great to be able to have this space.
Okay, one more thing that I thought, just it was mentioned in the Robbins actually, but sense of humor, I think that's also just worth bringing up. Like it's always kind of like a side note, or like, yeah, don't take yourself so seriously, but I think it's actually integral to all of this. And yeah, I think we've lost that like as a collective and need to find ways to get it back.
Yeah, I think that's a useful emotion that can be substituted for fear and anger when someone points out contradictions. And you're right, be like, "Oh, you're right. That is kind of silly, isn't it?" Okay, you know. So yeah. Oh, and one other thing is that I think I hope something as Andy you pointed out that you know various people in the audience are not going to agree with person X, Y, or Z, but I think, and they'll find where they sort of fit in the milieu of the dialogue. But I hope that what more than that what the various audience members can come away with is just being able to watch this episode or any of the episodes that we've all done together as sort of models for, I mean, right? We all communicate, right, across various different perspectives, right? Like, and I just, regardless of how, what we have said individually or collectively, and like just the idea that, right, we're all friends, and you know what I mean. And at the end of the day, at the end of the episode, we're probably more friends than we were last time, right? Even if we disagreed. And I think that's, I hope that can be modeled.
All right. Well, thank you all again. Jessica, great to have you back, but I know you're not going to be here next week. Jake, thank you for doing this again and following up on our PSYOP episode, which my mom loved. She loved the first episode a lot, and she was telling everyone to listen to it. And Kenny, it's always great to have you here. You'll be here next week, Kenny, or no? Okay. And we hope to have Eduardo back. So it's just going to be a rotating crew for this month, it looks like. All right, let me get to the end part. So that does it for this week's episode. What's Left is a weekly political podcast channel challenging the mainstream left. Post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes, wherever you found this episode, or on our blog at what-s-left.wednode.com. You can find past episodes of this podcast channel there and connect with us. I remind people, if you like anything you've heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our 9 platforms on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or BitChute, Odysee, Rumble, YouTube, or Telegram. If you'd like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog. You can find our blog and any of those links in the episode notes wherever you found this episode. So for myself and Jessica and Kenny and Jake, thank you all for being part of the episode, and we'll see you next week.
I do have a little checklist of like questions that you could ask yourself when you're looking at things. If you want to, if we can edit this out, but it's a little chart, like it's about 8 boxes. Shall I pull it up and just, yeah,
why not?
Real quick. It's sort of recaps, but the way my mind works is that, come on now, screen share here. When my brain is, and I have a lot of stuff floating around, I like to put it in tables and flowcharts. I guess I'm a huge nerd, because like I actually I enjoy the process of putting it in the flowchart as much as I enjoy the usefulness of it, right? So like I sort of broke down so when we're trying to sift through informations, I sort of broke it into 3 categories, right? So we've got the data itself, or the information itself, right? We've got the framework, right? We talked about, okay, which is whatever paradigm you're using to analyze it. And then like what types of presuppositions do you have about your framework, right? Now, approaching all 3 of these categories, right? I have up here at the top, right, this principle of non-contradiction, right? So when something is a contradiction, right, we should know that it's something that, right, this is not a valid conclusion, right? And we need to go back to the drawing board. And the golden rule part has to do with, right, how we approach the other side, which I've already articulated. So here's some of the questions, right? Immediately, what we have is, right, are there any contradictions in the data, right? If there are, right, we need to find a different conclusion or a different more information, right? We need to go back to the drawing board, right? Does the data contradict your framework, right? Okay, and then, right, can you resolve the contradictions between the data and your framework if you change your presuppositions about the framework, right? Or can a different framework entirely resolve the contradiction, right? Like now, if the data doesn't have any contradictions, it comports with the framework and the presuppositions, then I guess, right, you're probably on pretty good ground, right? But right, if your answer is yes to any of these, right, this is reason to, right, go back to the drawing board. Now, the stuff I hadn't read here is because, like, if you're believing something only because of these red categories, right, that's not really solid ground, right? Like, so first question in green is, do you believe the analysis from whatever source you're getting it from because you verified it with non-contradictory evidence from primary sources? Okay, that's right. That's a valid conclusion, right? But if it's just because it confirms your framework, right, or it's just because it confirms your presuppositions, right, and you can do this the other way, right? If you disbelieve something because it doesn't confirm, right? And then here at the bottom, well, I also have, do you believe the analysis because you trust the source, right? Just because you trust the person, right? Now, obviously, we've talked a lot about establishing trust, right? But trusting someone in and of itself is not a reason to believe them in the face of contradictory evidence, right? And then at the bottom here is basically the same question, just, right, is it because you have an emotional attachment? Now, obviously, these things often go together. In other words, right, if it doesn't confirm your framework, right, you're probably going to have an emotional reaction. So, right, like, if you're ever in a situation where, right, you're having an emotional reaction, or you're confused about something, or, right, you're kind of on the fence. I mean, I thought this might be sort of a nice way to lay it out, for instead of having to, when your head is swimming with thoughts, it's like, it's hard to think about which thought to sort of, pay more attention to. So, maybe if these are useful to you, you could just sort of go through the steps, right? Ask the question. And I put it together because that's largely how my mind works, right? And so rather than just go ad lib or whatever, I thought the table would be useful. I know.
I love it. I feel like my students would love it too. Can I use it in my class and give
yeah. I'll email it to you.
Great, because I'm terrible at stuff like that. They always want a freaking rubric or a formula, and I'm like, hey man, we're creative writers, and they're like, no, we're trying to write a research paper. I love it. I think it's super helpful.
Well, I do that frequently, but a lot of times, right? Because my head, oftentimes it's like, man, I think I know what this is. Like, let me just draw it out and then look at it. It's like, okay, now it's, and then it makes thinking about it easier, because it's like, right, I've got it organized in categories in my head. So, but yes, I will definitely email it to you.
Yeah. I probably have some questions about including it, only because I have questions about some of the, like, particularly the emotional part. And it's just, I feel like it takes us into a whole new area of questions for me about truth. So that's where I'm not sure.
Not to include it. I just thought
I want to talk about Jessica and Kenny, because I actually had an issue with, in some ways, the notion of a strong emotional thing being a source of inaccuracy, or a part where I might question something. I can also see, at least for me, and maybe I'm misunderstanding it, where a strong emotional response can be the basis for how I know. That can be the basis of challenging a framework, and it can force me to change my framework, because I'm having such a strong emotional response to the new information that I just got. There's almost an emotional truth that trumps the framework. I feel like I've had that experience before. And so that's where I don't want to, now we're opening up a new conversation. That's why I'm kind of struggling.
Yeah.
Well, I'm totally fine with not including it. I would have posited it earlier.
Before I become the censor of the new censor of what's left.
Straight. But since I figured I would at least go through it. So no, that's a good, you bring up an interesting point, I guess, because, right, you might have an emotional response that is, you're not able to articulate why you have the emotional response, but it is grounded in some moral principle. But I guess in my mind, as a simplified chart, it was more, am I only believing it or disbelieving it just because I really like the idea, or I really don't like it, right? Like if somebody points out, like, hey, here's some problems with what you're thinking here, and I'm like, it's like, that's right. Those challenges are things that I really need to wrestle with, but I don't like the way that makes me feel, so I'm not going to do that, right? That's kind of what I was alluding to. But we'll
I get what you're saying, though, Andy. I think it depends on the context, and I think it's really helpful as like you called it, like a cheat sheet or something. I think initially, Jake, like just as like a tool. But yeah, there's totally bigger questions about like what counts as a framework, and then definitely like the way that our whole culture prioritizes like data and like truth in the like scientific Johns Hopkins way versus emotion, or like sometimes emotion might actually be other stuff too. I feel like there's a whole plethora of words that could be used there.
All I know is that I'm gonna go test this out. I'm gonna tell people you're wrong. See how they react.
Plus, look, I'm a Cancer with those. I had triangles that were connected to all the water and stuff, so I can't have
emotional sensitivity.
I can't have people making fun of emotion and saying bad things about emotion. That's not right. I'm not going to let it stand.